In the quiet village of Abeke, my life with Amma seemed perfect, until doubts crept in and secrets threatened to unravel everything. Then came Kwame's confession, shaking my world to its core. Love, loyalty, and self-discovery collide as I navigate uncharted emotions and face a community that doesn't understand. This is my journey of truth and courage, where every choice tests the bonds we hold most dear. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. The village of Abeke was as serene as it was vibrant, nestled between rolling hills and lush fields that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. It was home, not just in the physical sense, but in the soul-deep way that only a place steeped in memories and love could be. I often thought of my life here as simple but fulfilling, a reflection of the people I held closest to my heart. Amma, my wife, was the cornerstone of that life. She was laughter and light, with a kindness that could soften even the sternest hearts. I'd always admired how easily she carried herself, her head held high but her words gentle, never condescending. We had been married for 5 years, and in that time, I had come to know the kind of love poets wrote about. She made our small house a home, filling it with warmth that spilled out into the courtyard, where flowers she tended seemed to bloom brighter than anywhere else in the village. Our neighbor, Kwame, often said as much. Amma's flowers could rival the heavens, he'd quip with a grin. Kwame was a fixture in our lives, his charm and humor weaving him into the fabric of our days. He had an easy rapport with Amma, and they'd often laugh over shared jokes while I watched from a distance, smiling at their camaraderie. But lately, I'd begun to notice something I couldn't quite name. A flicker of unease had taken root in my chest, subtle but persistent. It wasn't that I didn't trust Amma, no. Trust wasn't the issue. It was something else entirely, something I struggled to define. One afternoon, as we all stood by the market square, I found myself watching Amma and Kwame closely. They were laughing, the kind of laughter that came from shared understanding, and for a fleeting moment I felt like an outsider. I shook the thought away, chiding myself for reading too much into it. Yet, as we walked home later that evening, the unease lingered, threading itself into the fabric of my thoughts. At home, the routine of the evening began. Amma hummed softly as she prepared our dinner, her movements fluid and practiced. I sat nearby, absently carving a piece of wood, but my mind wasn't on the task. Instead, it wandered back to the market, to Kwame's laugh and the ease with which Amma responded. "Kojo?" Amma's voice broke through my thoughts, gentle but tinged with curiosity. "You've been quiet today. Is something on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure of how to articulate what I was feeling. "Nothing, Amma," I said finally, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I suppose." She studied me for a moment, her brows knitting together briefly before she nodded. "All right, but if there's ever anything, you can tell me." Her words were a balm, but they didn't erase the unease. That night, as I lay beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, I stared at the ceiling, wondering why I couldn't let the thought go. Kwame's visits were a regular occurrence, a normal part of our lives, but the next time he came over, I couldn't help noticing how Amma's face lit up at his arrival. He carried a basket of freshly picked yams, a gesture of goodwill, and Amma thanked him warmly, inviting him to sit. "You're always so kind, Kwame," she said, setting the basket aside. "Kojo, and I appreciate it." He waved her words off with a laugh. "It's nothing. You've both done more for me than I can count." I wanted to join in their laughter, to feel the same ease they seemed to share, but instead, I found myself retreating into silence. The unease I had tried so hard to ignore had grown roots, wrapping itself around my thoughts and refusing to let go. As the evening wore on, I excused myself early, feigning fatigue. In truth, I needed the solitude to wrestle with my emotions. I sat outside under the sprawling branches of the mango tree in our yard, staring out at the dimly lit village. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of night jasmine, but it did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. What was wrong with me? Kwame was a good man, a friend. Alma was my wife, my partner in all things. Yet here I was, tangled in thoughts I couldn't untangle, driven by feelings I couldn't explain. As the stars blinked into existence overhead, I made a silent vow. Whatever this was, this strange, unbidden jealousy, I would keep it to myself. Alma didn't deserve to be burdened by my insecurities, and Kwame had done nothing wrong. This was my battle to fight, and I would face it alone. Or so I thought. The morning sun filtered through the windows, its warmth kissing my face as I stirred awake. Alma was already up, the faint clatter of pots and pans signaling her morning routine. The scent of millet porridge wafted into the room, comforting yet unable to soothe the restless thoughts I had carried into the new day. I found her in the kitchen, humming an old tune her mother had taught her. She turned and smiled at me, her eyes bright with warmth. "You're up earlier than usual." I forced a smile, taking a seat by the small wooden table. "Couldn't sleep much. Too many thoughts, I suppose." She raised an eyebrow, her hands deftly stirring the pot on the stove. "You've been lost in your thoughts a lot lately. Are you sure everything is all right?" Her concern cut through me like a blade. I wanted to tell her, to lay bare the emotions I didn't fully understand, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I offered a weak reassurance. "Just work on my mind. The fields are relentless this season." Alma didn't press further, though the crease between her brows told me she wasn't convinced. Later that day, Kwame stopped by. He carried a bundle of plantains this time, his easy grin in place as always. "Morning, Alma." "Morning, Kojo." He called out, his voice filled with unbridled cheer. Alma lit up at his presence, her smile widening as she welcomed him in. "Kwame, you're always so thoughtful. Thank you for this." "It's nothing," he replied, brushing off the compliment. "Just thought you might like some for the week." I watched their exchange in silence, a lump forming in my throat. The way she smiled at him, was it different? Or was I imagining things? Was I being foolish? I felt trapped in a spiral of questions that had no answers. Kwame stayed for tea, as he often did. The three of us sat in the courtyard, the sun dappling the ground in patterns as the leaves of the mango tree swayed in the breeze. Alma and Kwame carried the conversation, their words flowing effortlessly between laughter and light-hearted banter. I sipped my tea in silence, my thoughts far too loud to let me join in. Kwame noticed my quietness and turned to me. "Kojo, you're unusually quiet today. Something on your mind?" Alma's eyes flicked toward me as well, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. I cleared my throat, forcing a small laugh. "Just tired, that's all. You two seem to be having enough fun without me." It was meant as a joke, but even as the words left my mouth, I realized they carried an edge I hadn't intended. Alma tilted her head, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than usual. Kwame chuckled, oblivious to the weight of my words. "Well, I'll leave you to your rest, then," Kwame said as he rose to leave. "Thanks for the tea, Alma. Kojo, take care." As he walked away, Alma turned to me, her voice soft. "Kojo, is there something you're not telling me?" I hesitated, the truth clawing at my chest. "Alma, it's nothing," I said, shaking my head. "I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go for now. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, I found myself unable to hold back my thoughts any longer. "Alma," I began, my voice hesitant, "do you think you spend too much time with Kwame?" Her hand, which had been reaching for the bowl of stew, froze midair. She looked at me, startled. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," I muttered, looking down at my plate. "It just seems like you're always laughing with him, always so happy." She set the bowl down, her brow furrowing. "Kojo, Kwame is our friend. He's been nothing but kind to us." "Why would you even say that?" I felt my face flush, a mix of embarrassment and frustration rising within me. "I didn't mean it that way," I said quickly. "It's just, sometimes it feels like I'm not part of whatever you two are sharing." Alma's expression softened, and she reached across the table to take my hand. "Kojo, I don't know where this is coming from, but you're my husband. My partner. Whatever I share with Kwame is nothing compared to what I share with you." Her words were a salve, but they couldn't completely erase the unease that had taken root in my heart. I nodded, squeezing her hand in return. I know, Amma. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up. She smiled, her eyes full of understanding. It's all right. Let's not let this come between us, okay? I nodded, but as we cleared the table and prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already shifted. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it was about Kwame that made me feel this way. Was it jealousy? Or was it something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face? The following day, I decided to follow Amma discreetly as she went about her errands. She mentioned visiting the tailor and stopping by the market, and though I told her I'd be busy with the fields, I trailed her steps from a distance. At the market, she greeted Kwame, who was standing by his usual spot selling plantains. They spoke for only a few minutes, their conversation light and punctuated with laughter. I couldn't hear their words, but the sound of their joy felt like a knife in my chest. I turned away, ashamed of myself. What was I doing? Amma had done nothing wrong, and neither had Kwame. Yet here I was, acting like a man consumed by irrational doubts. But even as I walked back to the fields, I knew I couldn't let go of the questions swirling in my mind. Whatever this was, it was far from over. The air was cool that evening, the breeze carrying with it the faint, earthy scent of rain. I had left the house under the pretense of needing a walk to clear my mind. In truth, I wanted to escape the weight of my thoughts and the unspoken tension that lingered between Amma and me. My footsteps carried me down familiar paths, past the mango trees that bordered the village, and toward the river that always seemed to calm me. I stopped by the water's edge, watching the ripples distort the reflection of the moon. My thoughts drifted again to Amma and Kwame, their laughter, their easy connection. A part of me wanted to confront Kwame, to demand answers for questions I hadn't even dared to ask. But I didn't know where to start. Kojo? The voice startled me, pulling me from my thoughts. I turned to see Kwame standing a few paces away, his face illuminated by the moonlight. He looked uncertain, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more hesitant. Kwame, I said, my voice wary. What are you doing out here? I could ask you the same thing, he replied, stepping closer. But I suppose we all need a quiet place to think sometimes. I nodded, unsure of what to say. We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the river filling the gap between us. Kojo, Kwame began, his voice softer now, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago. His tone sent a ripple of unease through me. What is it? I asked, my throat suddenly dry. He hesitated, looking down at his hands before meeting my gaze. I have feelings for you, Kojo. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I stared at him, unable to process what I had just heard. What? The word escaped my lips in a whisper, as if saying it louder would make it more real. Kwame took a step closer, his expression earnest. I know it sounds strange, and I never intended for this to happen. But it's the truth. I care about you more than I should. I took a step back, shaking my head. Kwame, this can't be. I'm married. I love Amma. I know, he said quickly. I know, and I respect that. But I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I needed you to know. My mind raced, a storm of emotions crashing over me. Confusion, guilt, anger, but beneath it all, there was something else. Something I couldn't name. This isn't right, I said, my voice trembling. Whatever you're feeling, it has to stop. Kwame nodded, his shoulders slumping. I understand. I needed to be honest with you. The silence that followed was unbearable. I couldn't bring myself to look at him, couldn't reconcile the man I had known with the confession he had just made. I should go, I said finally, turning away. Amma will be wondering where I am. Kwame didn't try to stop me, and for that I was grateful. I walked away quickly, the sound of my footsteps swallowed by the night. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of the impossible situation I now found myself in. Back at home, Amma was already asleep. I slipped into bed beside her, careful not to wake her. But sleep was impossible for me. I stared at the ceiling, replaying Kwame's words over and over in my mind. Why had he told me this? What did he expect me to do? And why couldn't I shake the strange mix of emotions his confession had stirred within me? The next morning, Amma noticed the dark circles under my eyes. Kojo, you look exhausted. Did you sleep at all? Not much, I admitted, avoiding her gaze. Just couldn't quiet my thoughts. She frowned, her concern evident. Kojo, whatever it is, you can talk to me. Her words were a knife to my chest. I wanted to tell her everything, to unburden myself of the secret that now weighed so heavily on me. But how could I? How could I look her in the eyes and tell her that our closest friend had feelings for me? That I didn't know how to feel about it? It's nothing, Amma, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired, that's all. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. As she left for the market, I stayed behind, my thoughts a tangle of guilt and confusion. Days turned into a blur as I tried to navigate my new reality. I avoided Kwame as much as possible, but in a village as small as Abeke, that was easier said than done. Every time I saw him, I felt the weight of his confession like a stone in my chest. And every time I looked at Amma, I felt like a fraud. The tension finally came to a head one evening when Amma confronted me. We were sitting in the courtyard, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting the world in shades of gold and orange. Kojo, she said, her voice firm but gentle, I know something is wrong. You've been distant, distracted. Please, tell me what's going on. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the look in her eyes stopped me. She deserved the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Amma, I began, my voice shaking, there's something you need to know. I told her everything, the jealousy I had felt, the confusion, and finally, Kwame's confession. I expected anger, betrayal, maybe even tears. But Amma surprised me. She was quiet for a long time, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Thank you for telling me, Kojo. I know that wasn't easy. I stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Amma, She held up a hand to stop me. This is a lot to process, Kojo. But we'll figure it out. Together. Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. But deep down, I knew our journey was far from over. Amma's calm reaction to my confession was unexpected, but it didn't erase the tension that now lingered between us. Over the next few days, we moved through our routines like strangers occupying the same space. I tried to act normal, to convince myself that her words, "We'll figure it out together," meant we were fine. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted, and I didn't know how to fix it. Kwame, too, seemed to sense the change. He stopped coming by the house as often, his usual cheerful visits replaced by brief, awkward exchanges whenever we crossed paths in the village. I avoided him as much as I could, but avoiding Amma was impossible. Her quiet presence felt heavier than any confrontation ever could. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the village, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Amma finally spoke. We were sitting in the courtyard, the silence between us broken only by the distant chirping of crickets. Kojo, she began, her voice steady but edged with resolve, I need to understand. What exactly are you feeling about all of this? I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know, I admitted, my words barely above a whisper. I feel confused, guilty, angry at myself for feeling this way. She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Guilty about what? That Kwame confessed his feelings? Or that a part of you doesn't know how to respond? Her words hit me like a blow, forcing me to confront the truth I had been avoiding. Both, I said after a long pause. I care about you, Amma. You're my wife and I love you. But what Kwame said, what he feels, it stirred something in me that I don't understand. Amma's expression softened, though her eyes still held a mix of pain and determination. Kojo, I need honesty from you. I need to know where I stand in all of this. You're everything to me, I said quickly, reaching for her hand. Amma, you're my world. This, whatever this is with Kwame, it doesn't change that. She pulled her hand back gently, her voice firm. But it does, Kojo. Whether you admit it or not, it's already changed everything. The weight of her words lingered between us as the days passed. Amma wasn't angry, but her silence spoke volumes. She was giving me space, but the more she held back, the more I felt like I was losing her. And for all my attempts to avoid Kwame, I couldn't stop thinking about him, his confession, the earnestness in his eyes, the way his words had unsettled me. Amma finally broke the stalemate one evening when she approached me in the kitchen. "Kojo," she said, her voice low, "I've been thinking. We need to talk to Kwame." I looked at her, startled. "Talk to him? About what?" "About all of this," she said, gesturing between us. "About what he told you, and what it's done to us. We can't keep pretending it didn't happen." "Amma, I don't think that's a good idea," I said, shaking my head. "What good will it do?" Her gaze hardened. "Kojo, we're stuck. We can't move forward if we don't face this together." Her determination left me no room to argue. Reluctantly, I agreed, and the next morning, Amma sent word to Kwame, asking him to meet us by the river. It was a private place, far from the prying eyes of the village. If we were going to have this conversation, it needed to happen away from the judgment of others. Kwame arrived just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the water. He looked uneasy, his usual confidence replaced by something more subdued. "Thank you for coming," Amma said, her tone neutral. She glanced at me, waiting for me to take the lead. I cleared my throat, my hands clenched at my sides. "Kwame, we need to talk. About everything." He nodded, his eyes darting between us. "I understand." Amma stepped forward, her voice steady. "Kwame, when Kojo told me what you said, I didn't know how to feel. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this isn't just about your feelings. It's about all of us." Kwame opened his mouth to respond, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Let me finish. I'm not angry with you, Kwame. And I'm not angry with Kojo. But we need to figure out what this means for all of us. Because right now, it's tearing us apart." Kwame looked at me, his expression filled with guilt. "Kojo, I never wanted to hurt you. Or Amma. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." "I know," I said, my voice low. "But Kwame, you've put me in a position I don't know how to handle. I feel like I'm betraying Amma just by having this conversation." "You're not betraying me, Kojo," Amma interjected. "Not as long as you're honest." For the first time in days, the tension began to ease. The three of us talked for hours, sharing our fears, our confusion, and our hopes. Kwame admitted that he hadn't expected anything from me, that he simply needed to unburden himself of his feelings. Amma, in turn, confessed that while she was hurt, she believed in our ability to work through this. By the time the conversation ended, the sun had disappeared completely, replaced by the pale light of the moon. We weren't healed, not yet. But for the first time, I felt like we had a chance. Amma reached for my hand as we walked back home, her grip firm and reassuring. "Kojo," she said softly, "this isn't going to be easy. But I'm willing to try if you are." I squeezed her hand, a sense of gratitude washing over me. "I'm willing," I said. "For you. For us." The morning air felt heavier than usual as I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the soft sunlight filtering through the window. Amma was beside me, her presence a quiet strength that I hadn't fully appreciated until now. Her suggestion to meet with Kwame had forced me to confront truths I had tried to ignore, but it had also brought us to a fragile peace, one that felt like it could shatter with the wrong step. Amma broke the silence. "Kojo," she said gently, "I've been thinking about what we discussed by the river." I turned to her, apprehension tightening my chest. "What about it?" She hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "I don't think we can just go back to how things were. Not without addressing the emotions that are still unresolved." "Amma, I'm trying," I said, my voice strained. "I'm trying to move past this to focus on us." "I know you are," she said, placing a hand on mine. "But ignoring it won't make it go away. It's not just about us anymore. Kwame is a part of this too." The truth of her words was undeniable, but that didn't make them easier to accept. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alma looked me in the eye, her expression steady. We explore this together. All of it. Honestly, openly, and without judgment. My breath caught in my throat. What are you saying? I'm saying that if we want to find peace, we need to stop pretending this isn't real, she said firmly. You have feelings to figure out, Kojo. And so do I. The only way forward is to face them together. Alma's words stayed with me throughout the day, their weight settling deep in my chest. By the time evening came, I felt like I was carrying a mountain. We had invited Kwame to dinner, and as the hour approached, I found myself pacing the courtyard, my nerves fraying with every passing moment. Kojo, come inside, Alma called gently. You'll wear a hole in the ground. I forced myself to stop, taking a deep breath before stepping into the house. Alma had prepared a simple meal, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. Kwame arrived soon after, his usual smile replaced by a tentative one. Thank you for having me, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Of course, Alma replied, her tone warm but measured. We're glad you could join us. We sat around the small table, the clinking of utensils filling the silence as we began to eat. The tension in the air was palpable, each of us tiptoeing around the conversation we knew we had to have. Alma was the one to break the silence. Kwame, she began, setting down her fork, Kojo and I have been talking about everything that's happened. And we've realized that we can't move forward without addressing it together. Kwame looked at her, then at me, his expression cautious. What does that mean? It means that we need to stop avoiding the truth, Alma said. Kojo cares about you, Kwame. And I know you care about him. But this isn't just about the two of you. It's about all of us. Kwame's eyes widened slightly, and I felt a surge of panic. Alma, what are you suggesting? I asked, my voice tinged with fear. I'm suggesting that we take this slowly, she said, her gaze steady. That we give ourselves permission to feel, to explore what this means, without fear of judgment. Kwame looked at me, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Kojo, is this what you want? I hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I looked at Alma, her eyes filled with quiet strength, and then at Kwame, his vulnerability laid bare. I don't know what I want, I admitted. But I know I can't figure it out on my own. Alma nodded, her hand reaching for mine. Then we'll figure it out together. The rest of the evening was quieter, the tension slowly giving way to something lighter, something fragile but hopeful. By the time Kwame left, I felt a sense of relief, as though a door had been opened, letting in air I hadn't realized I needed. That night, as Alma and I lay in bed, she turned to me, her voice soft in the darkness. Kojo, I know this is hard. But I believe in us. I believe we can find a way through this. I pulled her close, the warmth of her body grounding me. I believe in us too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I'm willing to try for you. For us. She smiled, her hand resting on my chest. We'll take it one step at a time. Together. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a flicker of hope, a small, fragile thing, but enough to keep me going. The village festival was just days away, and Abeke buzzed with energy. Stalls were being built, bright cloth banners strung across the market square, and the air filled with the promise of music and laughter. Normally, I would have looked forward to the festival, a chance to celebrate our community and traditions, but this year, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Alma, Kwame, and I had agreed to attend together. It had been her idea, of course. We can't keep hiding, she had said. The village will talk no matter what we do, but we need to show them that we're not ashamed of who we are or what we're trying to figure out. I had reluctantly agreed, but now, as the day approached, doubt crept into my mind. Was it worth the risk? What if the whispers turned to shouts? What if our fragile new understanding shattered under the weight of public scrutiny? The day of the festival arrived, and the village square was alive with color and sound. Drummers played lively rhythms, children chased each other through the crowd, and the scent of roasted yams and spicy stew filled the air. I stood with Alma and Kwame near the edge of the square, the three of us dressed in our best traditional clothes. Alma wore a flowing Kent dress that shimmered in the sunlight, her confidence radiating in every step she took. Kwame, in a crisp agbada, stood beside her, his usual easy grin replaced by a nervous smile. I adjusted the sash of my tunic for the third time, trying to mask the anxiety bubbling inside me. As we walked into the crowd, heads turned. Whispers followed us like a shadow, the village buzzing with speculation. I could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Why are they together? What does it mean? Alma held her head high, her hand brushing lightly against mine in a gesture of reassurance. Let them talk, she whispered. We know our truth. We spent the afternoon moving from stall to stall, trying to lose ourselves in the festivities. Children ran past us, laughing, and for a moment I almost forgot the tension that had followed us here. Almost. It wasn't until late afternoon that the festival's focus shifted to the main stage, where Nana Kofi, the village elder, was scheduled to speak. He was a respected figure, known for his wisdom and fairness, and his words often set the tone for the community. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd fell silent, their attention fixed on him. My friends, he began, his deep voice carrying across the square, today we gather to celebrate not just our traditions, but the bonds that hold us together as a community. His speech was inspiring, touching on the importance of unity and the strength that came from embracing diversity. But then, to my surprise, he paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on us. I have heard whispers, he said, his tone deliberate. Whispers about love, about change, about the courage it takes to walk a path that others may not understand. And I want to say this, love is not a threat to tradition. It is the heart of it. It is what binds us, what makes us human. The crowd murmured, shifting uncomfortably. Nana Kofi raised a hand, silencing them. We must learn to see each other not through the narrow lens of judgment, but through the wide, open eyes of compassion. To those who choose love, no matter how unconventional, I say this, you are welcome here. You are valued here. And you are part of this community. I felt Alma's hand tighten around mine, her grip steady and strong. Kwame glanced at me, his expression a mixture of relief and gratitude. The tension in my chest began to ease, replaced by a tentative hope. As Nana Kofi stepped down from the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. Some clapped enthusiastically, their faces warm with acceptance, while others joined more hesitantly, their expressions guarded. It didn't matter. For the first time, I felt like we weren't alone. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. We joined the dancing, the rhythmic beat of the drums pulling us into the heart of the celebration. Alma laughed as she spun in circles, her dress flowing around her like a wave. Kwame and I shared a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. By the time the festival began to wind down, the sky was a deep indigo, the stars scattered like diamonds above us. We walked home together, our steps slow and unhurried. Alma, I said, breaking the comfortable silence, thank you. She looked at me, her expression soft. For what? For believing in us, I said. For being brave when I couldn't be. She smiled, her hand brushing against mine. We're in this together, Kojo. Always. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. Nana Kofi's words echoed in my mind, a reminder that love, no matter its form, was worth fighting for. And as I drifted off to sleep, I realized that for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. The morning after the festival, the village felt different. It wasn't the festive decorations or the lingering echoes of drums in the air, it was the way people greeted us. Some smiled warmly, their eyes soft with understanding, while others avoided our gaze, their discomfort evident. The whispers had not disappeared, but they no longer felt like sharp blades. They were quieter now, less hostile, as though Nana Kofi's words had planted a seed of acceptance. Alma was the first to rise, her footsteps light as she moved through the house. I found her in the kitchen, slicing fruit for breakfast, her face calm and serene. You seem at peace, I said, leaning against the doorframe. She turned, her smile bright but understated. I am. Yesterday was a turning point. I feel like we've started something new, something better. I nodded, joining her at the table. I think you're right. For the first time, I feel like we can face this together. Kwame came by later that morning, his steps hesitant as he approached the courtyard. He looked at us, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I needed to see you both. Come in, Kwame, Amma said warmly. You're always welcome here. As he sat with us, the conversation flowed naturally, as though the weight of the past weeks had lifted. We spoke not just of the festival, but of the future, of what this new dynamic might look like and how we would navigate it together. I know this won't be easy, Kwame said, his voice steady. But I'm willing to try if you both are. Amma reached for my hand, her gaze meeting mine. We're willing. I nodded, feeling a sense of unity I hadn't expected. Together, I said firmly. We'll figure this out. As the day went on, I felt a sense of hope take root in my chest. It was fragile, like a young sapling, but it was there. And as the three of us sat together, sharing laughter and plans for the future, I realized that our journey was far from over, but for the first time, I was ready to face it.